Awesome, then I will hand it over to Janique for the land acknowledgement.
Ottawa is built on unceded Algonquin and Anishinaabe territory. The peoples of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation have lived on this territory for millennia. Their culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this place. And the city of Ottawa honors the peoples and the land of the Algonquin and Anishinaabe Nation.
All right, then with that, Michelle, if you'd like to take it away. And Elizabeth, if you have any comments, feel free to jump in.
No, I think just thank you so much, Michelle. This is a really timely topic, not just because of COVID, but because of the Canada Benefit and just also recent stats that we've seen coming out around poverty. So we're really excited to have you here today to speak to us a little bit about Disability Without Poverty, the work that you do, and why it's so important for our community. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for joining us today and for inviting me to speak to you. I'm going to speak about disability poverty, the Canada Disability Benefit. Okay. Hi everybody. Thank you for inviting me today. I guess I was speaking while I was on mute. How many times have we all done that in the last 2 years? So I'm here to speak about disability poverty, the Canada Disability Benefit as it's currently proposed, and Disability Without Poverty, the movement that I co-chair and how it's grown in the last year. So my name is Michelle Hewitt. I live in Kelowna, BC, on the ancestral and unceded territories of the Cfsa Okanagan Nation. I've been disabled since 2008 when I got an aggressive case of multiple sclerosis that had me using a wheelchair full-time in 6 months and medically retired from a career as a school principal. Since then, I became a disability advocate and I volunteer as much as my body lets me. I'm also a PhD student where my research looks at the societal values that have allowed us to think it's acceptable for younger adults with chronic illnesses to have no option but to live in our long-term care homes that are designed for seniors with dementia. I'm just waiting to defend my research proposal, so I hope to be a PhD candidate really soon. My other passion, however, is the eradication of disability poverty. And as I said, I have the honor of being the co-chair of Disability Without Poverty. So I'm going to give you an introduction to what we mean by disability poverty, and then talk about the opportunity presented by the Canada Disability Benefit, and close by saying what we've been doing at Disability Without Poverty to make this disability benefit a reality. I want to take you on a small journey to introduce you to disability poverty. Imagine a group of 100 Canadians, young, old, from coast to coast to coast, representing the rich diversity of this country. I see them talking, laughing, sharing photos of their family. Maybe someone has a ball and a game breaks out. 10 of those Canadians live in poverty. Sure, they're probably still joining in, and you might not even know which 10 it is, but they live with the daily stress of not knowing how they're going to feed their family or keep a roof over their head or any of the other major issues that come with living in poverty. Out of those 10 Canadians, 4 of them are disabled. On top of their concerns for food, clothing, and shelter, they can't afford to pay for vital medications, the care they need, or the medical devices they rely on to function. When we look at the statistics more closely, we see that 22% of Canadians are disabled, but they make up 41% of that group of people who live in poverty. They're overrepresented. There's twice as many disabled people in the group than statistics alone would count for. When we look into this further, we see that disabled people are less likely to be employed, like 59%, than those without disabilities, 80%. And often those that are employed end up chronically underemployed in minimum wage, part-time positions, earning a wage that is insufficient to support them. Most disabled people who live in poverty rely on assistance from either federal, provincial, or territorial governments, if they're eligible at all. The assistance from these programs is way below the poverty line, the 52 poverty lines that currently make up Canada's official poverty line. This slide shows just the metropolitan rates for the poverty line in 2017. There's also rates for smaller urban communities and rural communities. For example, if you live in Vancouver, provincial disability assistance is $1,358.50 a month, but the official poverty line is $2,028. Whereas in St. John's, Newfoundland, the assistant rate is $904 and the official poverty line is $1,867. Travel north to Iqaluit and you'll find that the assistance rate is $1,019 and the official poverty line hasn't yet been calculated for Nunavut, but we know that the price of groceries are out of sync with the rest of the country, with orange juice costing 26 bucks and a jar of pasta sauce 13 bucks. So what's the impact of these numbers? We can tell you many stories of people who have to make choices between medication and food, who can't live with the person they love because our government systems mean that they would lose not only the money from their disability benefit, but the services they rely on. Instead, I'm going to tell you one story of Madeline. When you leave my presentation, Google "I am Madeline," and you'll find a podcast and many articles written by Madeline and her friends, giving you far more details than I can now. Madeline is in her 50s and disabled through chronic illness from a combination of diseases like ME, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, that are most easily described as post-viral syndrome, words that become more familiar to us as we become more aware of COVID long haulers. There is no official treatment for Madeline's diseases, but she's found a range of treatments, mostly naturopathic, that give her enough energy and make her pain and fatigue tolerable. However, none of these treatments are covered by her province, and the extent of Madeline's disability means she cannot work. She relies on her provincial disability assistance program and GoFundMe campaigns run by friends. But that money is about to run out. So what next? Madeline sees only one option that our government has made available to her: MAID, medical assistance in dying. She's already been approved, and when the money is gone, potentially sometime in the next 2 months, Madeline will be gone too. No matter your thoughts on MAID, no one in Canada should ever use it because they don't have enough money to live. Disability poverty is about more than cutting back, doing without, making do. It's literally the difference between life and death. So you may have heard about the Canada Disability Benefit, a new benefit that was first proposed by the federal government in the throne speech in September 2020. Since then, there have been a number of commitments. There was some money set aside in the spring budget of 2021. By the summer of 2021, we had a bill, C-35, but the election came along and wiped that away. We then had considerable attention in various election platforms, and on the International Day for People with Disabilities, both Minister Qualtrough and the Prime Minister made statements saying that the benefit will happen. And behind the scenes, we know there are roundtables taking place to get opinions from many sectors. However, we believe that this is a promise too big to be left to the government to do on their own. The benefit has to actually benefit the people who need it. It has to make major systemic change to allow this to happen. We believe that now while the benefit is being developed, disabled people must be included in all aspects of the design. Only by understanding the lived experience of disabled people living in poverty will this benefit actually benefit them. The numbers I gave earlier show that disabled people are living in abject poverty. They did before the pandemic, and their conditions are only getting worse. You may have seen in the news recently, inflation is rising fast, and most disability benefits, provincial benefits, are not index linked. So we need this to be fast tracked. We need to get the money in people's hands as soon as possible, which realistically is probably 2023. This new Canada Disability Benefit brings opportunity to right some of the issues that plague our wider benefit system for disabled people. We would hope these changes would trickle down to provincial and territorial practices. Not getting them right means that we lock the problems in at a federal level, meaning changes are even harder at a provincial level. One of the big issues provincially is that many benefits are means tested across a family. It removes autonomy from disabled people, from having the dignity of their own money. It creates dangerous situations when people cannot leave abusive relationships because they have no access to their own money. We believe this benefit needs to be individualized as a priority. As I mentioned previously, this benefit needs to benefit disabled people. Disabled people already have a complex patchwork of financial benefits alongside goods and services. This new benefit must be in addition to them. We have the next slide, please. Thank you. We saw earlier that the gaps between these benefits and the poverty line are huge, so we must make sure that there are no clawbacks, meaning that the other benefit providers cannot take back benefits that they currently provide because disabled people receive this new benefit. You may have seen in the news the many scenarios where CERB has resulted in pensions for seniors and some disability benefits being clawed back unexpectedly. This simply has to stop. Those who qualify for a new federal, territorial, or provincial benefit should not have to apply for this new benefit. What more could possibly be learned? They need speedy access and therefore should be automatically eligible. There are those who are not in receipt of any benefit currently, particularly those with invisible and episodic disabilities. We may need to make sure there's a straightforward process for those to apply. I kind of see that the slides are a little bit out of sync with my speech, but I'll talk to the slide rather than, if you go back one. Disabled people want to work if they can, and work has to work for them. There must be a generous earnings exemption so that people are able to keep the money they earn, paying for additional supports that they are not able to get when they're out of money, and even saving for their future for retirement, where they continued to have increased costs, because your costs don't stop when you pass that barrier at 65. And finally, the Canada Disability Benefit must actually lift disabled people out of poverty by being part of a system of benefits that provides an income that's above Canada's official disability line. Sorry, if you move on, Carly, I'll go move on. The slide begins, there we go, thank you. I'll start this slide again. So finally, the Canada Disability Benefit must actually lift disabled people out of poverty by being part of a system of benefits that provides an income that's above Canada's official poverty line, so that it takes into account the additional cost of disability. Just think for a moment what our ask is there. It's not to lift people way above the poverty line. It's not for unicorns and rainbows. It's just for people to live at the poverty line. So at Disability Without Poverty, we needed to know where all Canadians stand on these issues. In the summer of 2021, We commissioned an Angus Reid survey. So we found that 9 out of 10 Canadians favour a Canada disability benefit, and the support was strongest in Quebec. 88% agree with the statement a Canada disability benefit is an essential commitment for the government to make. It's time the country came together to end disability benefits. Nearly 2/3 believe that the Canada disability benefit should be set above the poverty level. And 74% believe that the 3-year consultation timeline that we were originally given for the Canada disability benefit is too slow. We saw this as a strong mandate for our work at Disability Without Poverty. So we set about building a movement where there's place for everybody. Importantly, this movement's led by disabled people. We built a diverse leadership group, but we come to the tables as individuals. No one represents any organisation they belong to, or the community they live in, or any of the marginalised groups they belong to directly. Instead, they bring all their lived experiences to the table to be part of our discussions. To fuel our movement, we believe in 3 core actions. The first is to mobilise our voice and power. We believe in the need to mobilise the voices of all disabled people, and we look to do that through inviting people to join us in discussion, to share their thoughts, to express their views. We've used the Angus Reid survey to do that, as we intentionally surveyed disabled people on top of a general population survey. We engaged people with our own questions, and we have recently started putting out question of the week on our social media platform so that we collect in everybody's thoughts. So through that, we listen to grassroots communities of disabled people, and we use their stories to fuel the multiple pieces we've written for mainstream and social media and for our conversations with government. So our next action is that we work with government on designing the benefit. We believe the government are our partners in this. They need us. They need to hear from disabled people. So we ran a parliamentary e-petition for 60 days over Christmas that got almost 18,000 signatures. We regularly meet with civil servants in key aspects of the government to tell them the work we're engaged in and to listen to their comments. We take part in roundtable discussions at the highest levels, and we reach out to parts of the government like Statistics Canada to ensure that they are part of the conversation too. We also believe in securing public support for ending disability poverty. We won't end poverty for disabled people without the support of Canadians who are not disabled. This means being active on social media and in mainstream media. We must reach out to those who don't currently know a disabled person and help them to understand the lives of disabled people who live in poverty. It costs money to do this work. It's just a fact of life. We made the decision to be independently financed because our ability to advocate and partner with government is compromised when we take government funds. Instead, we're supported by private and community foundations to preserve our independence. So last year was our first year, and we worked hard to get established. It's slow, grinding work, constantly trying to get established. And as the year went by, we began to see the momentum shift. Disability poverty became an issue during the election. The media began to reach out to us instead of us reaching out to them. Slowly, we felt the momentum sliding. And on the slide, there's a list of things that we did, but as I said before, we did multiple op-eds. We reached out through the Angus Reid survey. We met with the Prime Minister and Minister Qualtrough multiple times. We ran a very active social media campaign during the election. We wrote a letter to the Prime Minister that was signed by 200 Canadians. And as I said, we ran our parliamentary e-petition. So now our work continues, but the focus shifts to not if, but when. Our next hurdle is to get the Canada Disability Benefit reintroduced and passed. because without that, the benefit simply doesn't happen. We're right now working on a new campaign, so look out in the next month. We continue to work with MP Mike Morris, who authorised our petition. The process is that now he gets to read the petition in Parliament and the government gets 45 days to respond to it. We are, as I just said, working on a new campaign. We continue to talk to everybody and most importantly, to listen. We want to hear from researchers, academics. We want to hear from provincial partners, provincial governments. And most importantly, we want to talk to disabled people, to talk to individuals across Canada, to sustain grassroots support. Together, we will make sure eradicating disability poverty remains a national priority. So please join with us, please take action. And I'm happy to answer any questions that anybody has at this point.
I mean, first off, Michelle, thank you so much for that presentation. I am totally blown away. Just some quick instructions for Q&A. If anyone's unfamiliar with Zoom, if you want to ask a question, you can raise your hand and then we can unmute you. You can speak. If you'd like to be kept anonymous, feel free to send questions to me via chat or Elizabeth. And feel free to just drop questions in the chat as well.
Maybe I'll start with one. It's Elizabeth. What do you think is the biggest barrier, the one single biggest barrier keeping disabled Canadians in poverty?
So I think there's a couple of barriers. In terms of a knowledge space for all Canadians, I think there's an assumption out there that disabled people are somehow taken care of. I think there's an assumption that somehow disabled people receive money, that they do not live in these situations. I think that also feeds into a sort of an age-old narrative to do with the worthy and unworthy poor and those sorts of things that those of us who know our disability history goes back to 1605, right, and is Elizabethan poor laws. So I think one of the barriers is a misunderstanding. The second part to it is that disabled people have simply been legislated into poverty over years. So there are only 3 out of the 13 provinces and territories who have their disability payments index linked. So that means that every year it sets up this position where the finances that people receive, which I showed are way below the actual poverty line, fall behind, and it sets up that feeling of going cap in hand to ask, can we have a raise? Because when you don't even stay with inflation, well, obviously you fall behind, right? Because costs went up and your income stayed the same. So that's where I would see that it comes from. There's misunderstanding and there's things that are hard baked into the way our society operates. Carly, you're muted.
Was I talking under my breath again? I do this all the time. I'm a professor's nightmare. It is a recurring theme. If I'm here, I will ask, how do you manage raising awareness in the non-disabled, general public, while also accurately portraying disability experiences that they might find unsanitized or a little too out of their comfort zone?
Yeah, I have no problem with putting people out of their comfort zone. The story that I told of Madeline, that's a very real story. And it's not the only one. It's just one that's very prescient. Madeline's friends are working hard to publicize what's going on with her. So I don't think that we necessarily need to sanitize things for people, because if we were, we wouldn't be telling our truths, right? I do worry, though, as we tell those stories, that we do need to make sure that we still show that disabled people are the fun, vibrant, active, full members of society that we are, right? That we are amazing people, and that should shine through everything at the same time as getting across this message of how we're treated, right? So that's the line that I see that we have to walk.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I see that Amanda has their hand up if you would like to take it away.
Sure. Hey, Michelle, thank you so much for this. This has just been, I mean, not so great. I'm really excited about this and all the work that's being done. And March of Dimes loves being a partner with Disability Without Poverty. You talked about that you've met with the Prime Minister and with Minister Qualtrough. Can you tell us a little bit more about those meetings and what have they said? Like, is there anything you can report?
Right. I wasn't in the meeting with the Prime Minister, but I think there may be other people on this call who were. But yeah, we've certainly met with Minister Qualtrough a couple of times, and you know, we come at this, and I personally come at this in a totally non-partisan way. But the minister talks our talk, right? She's one of us, she's a disabled woman, and she firmly believes in this. And she is putting this forward at a time when economically, you know, everybody's like, oh, well, we've spent so much on the pandemic. We don't have any money for these sorts of things. But she recognizes the needs of disabled people. And so I always feel encouraged when I speak to her that we do have somebody who is there and is advocating for us. I'm also really encouraged that her approach to this is also non-partisan, and that in recent days she has been meeting with others, including Mike Morris, who is the MP, the Green MP, who was our authorized, to use their terminology, our sponsor, if you like, for the e-petition. And so, you know, it was great that they got together, and I know she's met with someone from the NDP, and I would hope that she meets with someone from the Bloc and the Conservative Party as well, because, you know, this is a non-partisan issue. I know when the Accessible Canada Act finally passed, it passed unanimously. We need this bill to start on its little journey right away, because, you know, and hope that it's a small, fast, expedited journey that has non-partisan support, because who can't support eradicating disability poverty? Please, you know, I'd love to talk to them.
So can I just add, Carly, do you mind if I add to that?
Absolutely, go for it.
Our CEO, Len Baker, met with the relevant minister, John Abbott in Newfoundland.
Mm-hmm.
And we asked about provincial clawbacks. And he's a Liberal, and I very much expected him to say, well, of course we won't claw that back. His response was, well, we'll see. You know, and that was, I know. And I think what they're waiting for is, you know, is more from the federal government on this benefit. And I think the sooner it happens, the better off we're all going to be.
So I know that last summer, and this isn't, you know, special behind the scenes stuff, because the Minister Qualtrough has spoken about this publicly. Last summer, she began meeting with all the provincial and territorial partners, her provincial equals, if you like.
Counterparts,
yeah, those people. She met with them and she laid it on the table. This will not be clawed back. Now, you know, we could talk long and hard about what the mechanisms may be to make that happen. So, for example, we know that there is a health transfer tax, right? A health transfer from the feds to the provinces. There's also a social one that's much less used. So there are mechanisms that the federal government has at their disposal to be able to make the clawback piece stick. You know, like, as you said, Newfoundland, right? I gave those facts. $904, poverty line, 1,800 bucks in St. John's, Newfoundland. What is there to claw back, really? Yeah. What are you going to take off people? How much more poverty would you like them to live in? Yeah. So on top of, I know the minister has set her stall out firmly what she expects. This in the bill that happened that then fell because we went into the election, it was called a supplement. It's current, it's, you know, the language is very deliberate. It is to go on top of what's already there. Disability without poverty, our response to that, to, you know, parallel that federal government process, is we're beginning our, we have strategies beginning in provinces as well. So we currently have a BC strategy that is been up and running for a couple of months. I see on this call that we also have Andrea, who is only just getting going with an Alberta strategy. So it seems we're moving across the country from west to east, but we are ready. Ontario to soon, you know, obviously the biggest province with a lot of pull. So we see the need to start that grassroots movement broadly, nationally, but also within each province with community organizers that talk to grassroots organizations that work at a provincial level, as well as us at a national level, you know, talking to grassroots national organizations, but also across the country. We need to build that movement across the country so that, you know, we have our provincial strategies talking to our provincial governments and making people very much aware of what disability poverty is. All levels of government need to buy into this. They need to buy into that we are going to lift people out of disability poverty. It's something that it just seems so basic in this day and age, you know. I talked a little bit about, we have people that want to work and make that work for them, but we know the people that we're talking about here are people who can't work. So they're people with congenital disabilities, or they're people who acquired their disabilities. And, you know, we know that, you know, many of us on this call, our lives are built around making sure that we have an adequate income, as well as managing our disability. We're full citizens of Canada. We deserve not to live in poverty.
Yeah, 100. Well, March of Dimes is here to help. So, you know, we'll
thank you, Amanda.
Take the lead where we can and where we're needed.
And I do see a lot of questions coming in, so I do, and thank you so much for your question, Amanda. Jennifer asked in the chat, how would a provincial organization go about joining and supporting your movement? So pretty on theme with what we just discussed.
Right, thank you. So as I said, Alberta and BC, you should, you know, if you get in touch with us and you're in those provinces, I can, you know, we can link you up. hello@disabilitywithoutpoverty.ca. We can link you up with the people. If somebody could just type that in the chat for me, because I don't have that ability. You know, we can link you up as we move across the country, right? We will keep you linked. But if you're currently somebody who wants to reach out and help, and it's not a province that we're working in, you know, we add you to our national list, and as things come up that are specific to your province, we can talk about those as well. So we are aiming to be as nimble as we can with the limited resources that we have to make that happen.
Awesome. And Andrea, you've been super patient. If you want to go ahead.
Hi, Michelle.
Hey, Andrea.
Thanks for the conversation. So I have a question about students. So as you know, I am a disabled student, and NEADS being a National Education Association of Disabled Students, I'm wondering if you have any ideas of how we can include students from post-secondary education places in Canada. So how do we go to our fellow students and let them know what's going on, and how can we help them aid the change?
I see that, as I'm sure somebody from NEADS could speak to that as well, but I see that very much as what we're here doing. You know, as you know, Andrea, I'm a student too, and as a former educator, you know, my heart and passion is very much in us motivating students to social change and social justice. And you know, if there's no time in your life that you're more engaged than when you're a student, I think, in social issues, which is so very important. So I think, you know, NEADS also has this structure set up, obviously, that is already across the country. And I think this has been a, being able to talk with Frank and then to meet Elizabeth and Carly. Elizabeth and I, when we met for the first time on Monday, we found out that our research interests are completely aligned. So it was just one of these amazing conversations. So, anytime we continue to build a relationship, we look at what direction it can go. And I'm so excited, that when, for example, when we started the petition and we didn't have many signatures in Quebec to start off with, I reached out to Frank, and, it got shared through the NEADS members that are busy at work in Quebec. And I'm so grateful to them to be able to reach out to their members, who are then able to spread it, on university social media pages and so on. So I think there's easy pieces like the social media shares, but I also obviously firmly believe in the social commitment of students, and that is a body of people that, I'm sure, as I mentioned, this is Andrea, who is just beginning work on our Alberta strategy, and I'm sure you'll be reaching out. I know we already have connections in university in Alberta, researchers and profs that are already helping us. It's just wonderful to see.
Great, thank you.
So sorry, I see Frank has popped back up on Zoom. Anything you want to add about, needs and financial support for students, or are you just vibing?
Well, I was thinking about, I just wanted to show my face again to show that I'm engaged
Still
in
here.
all. I didn't want to distract from Michelle's presentation, but just to say that, we of course shared the petition, and we've shared on a fairly regular basis communications from Disability Without Poverty. And of course, we're very, not just interested in this issue, it impacts, of course, disabled students and graduates with disabilities who struggle and often live in poverty. And we, of course, in terms of our community and our outreach, what I think we'd like from you, Michelle, is for you to continue to send us communications that you would like us to share with our network. And of course, that includes in sharing the communications within, of course, the CCD community. So we're a member group of the Council of Canadian Disabilities. I see CCD folks here today, which is great. And so we share with the provincial and national CCD members. We're one of the national groups, but also we have quite an extensive network of on-campus disabled students groups that are run by students with disabilities, supported by their student unions or student governments, and supported in the same way that women's centers and international student centers, LGBTQ centers, etc., are. And of course, the disabled students groups work in a very intersectional way, so that they recognize, of course, that the students who they support, who are their constituents, have all sorts of different identities that they bring to the school experience with respect to disability, of course, but that's only one part of who they are. But gender, race, ethnicity, all of these things, right, that impact the experience that folks have in school and the opportunities and obstacles in their way. And that includes, of course, in the workplace and in society in general, right? So we're regularly in contact through our various platforms, our websites, we've got 4 of them, our social media engagement.
Oh, that happens.
Carly, others are creating, right, or putting together. So I just to say that we want to continue to share your communications and do it, in a strategic.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
I'm so sorry. I will shamelessly promote NEADS at the end of the event, but for now, I'd love to take a few more questions. I see Carlos has had their hand up for a while. If you'd like to go ahead.
I think it's Carlos Sosa. Certainly, I come from a perspective as a union activist. I'm I'm involved in the Canadian Labour Congress's Disability Working Group. Now, I also give you perspective as somebody who has worked inside a newsroom, which I have, and that was for 3 months over a year ago, as part of an internship at CBC. And as I'll say this, petitions are great, but as I would say, the conversations happen in our communities across the country. I want to say that very clearly, that they happen in communities across the country. They happen when people take action. And that means by writing letters to the editor, by willing to pitch stories to the media. And I mean, even writing a pitch is an art. I mean, you don't learn these skills overnight, but when you do, use them, and give reporters different story leads or different aspects that they can follow. Like, and I think that's a really critical point. And encouraging students to write opinion pieces. I mean, students need to take action in their own communities. So I just wanted to make that point very, very, very clear.
I completely support you in that, Carlos. We actually had 26 op-eds published last year. It was one of the things that we completely worked on, and we worked on, you know, when issues came up, the various people in our leadership team that were, you know, more attached through who they were, whether you know, whether it was geographical, whether it was the situation that they lived in, whether it was somebody that was a parent of disabled child. You know, we made sure that we had the most relevant person, right, the most relevant piece, and pitch it to the right people. So yes, I completely agree. Just to talk our petition, we purposely, I agree with you in that, you know, petitions are great, but this one it came off the back of our letter that we had 200 signatures on, because an outpouring, people wanted to sign, they wanted to sign something. And rather than signing something that was you know, we could have gone to change.org or something like that, we purposely went to the parliamentary e-petition, because that got us inside another system as well. That got us placed into, there is now it has to be read in Parliament, and the government has to reply within 45 days. So all of those parts, right? You know, that you be purposeful in your actions, right? Be, you know, and as I said, letter writing campaigns, be purposeful about what the ask is. Sometimes we ask for things in a very general way, but often behind that, there's a strategy as to why we're making that general ask.
Awesome. Very insightful. And Heather Walkus does have their hand up. I will shamelessly promote the event we have in 2 weeks with Heather talking. Anyways, Heather, if you want to ask your question. Or maybe person with Heather Walkus' name, you're currently muted.
Oh, sorry. It is Heather Walkus. The real Heather Walkus is speaking. I gave someone else my Zoom link so they could get on the call. That's why there's two of me here, which is a scary thought. I'm really, the strategic way that you're going about this is really from a community development process, that people have skin in the game, whether they write a letter to the editor, whether they sign a petition, why you sign that petition. It's now going to be in parliamentary record. You can now say, we brought this to you. You now can build on that. And that's the important thing about movements, is that you're building, always building and adding to and going to the next. My question to you, and this is something that drives me nuts, is the word benefit. To bring people, to me, it's a human right to have food, clothing, a place to live, adequate income, or the society has a basic responsibility to all of its citizens to ensure we have a baseline that we can operate in. Most people, what is it today? It's the 4th of February. By the 7th of February, most people that I know in the disability community and associated community are trying to figure out how they're going to make it through the rest of the month. And more of our time is spent on just survival. So when people say, well, you know, people with disabilities aren't participating, excuse me, if your home support doesn't show up till noon and you need them to get out of bed, you don't get out of bed till noon. How do you then get a job that is set up that you go, you know, got to be there by 8 a.m. None of the systems work together. They are all siloed out. And so my question to you is, how do we then, what are the words we need to use? Canada benefit, that's a government thing. But strategically, how do we reframe and use words that are more indicative of what it is? I am tired of the charity model where, you know, medically something is wrong with me and then charities have to look after me because there's something wrong. And that attitude, when we talk about benefits, transfers over. So dignity, income, a baseline of how we can live. How do we structure those words? What are some terms that might be helpful for us to use?
Yeah, thanks, Heather, for putting me on the spot. Heather and I know each other, so I can joke with her. Thanks for asking me to wordsmith on the spot, which isn't my strength, even though I do like to wordsmith a lot. For me at the moment, I'll take it back to what I kept saying, you know, through the benefit has to benefit, right? There's a wider sense of the meaning of the word benefit than it's currently used. We see the word benefit and we think money. So part of the work that we're doing at the moment is to try and to break that, never mind change the word benefit, so that we know that when I talk about clawbacks, that sure, let's go back to those, you know, $904 in St. John's or $13.58 in Vancouver, but we also know that people with disabilities need other things. As you said, Heather, you need home support to get you out of bed in the morning, or you need a transportation assistance, or you're somebody on a ventilator. Whatever it is, as a disabled person, we have additional needs. One of my big concerns is that it's very easy to monitor that the amount of money that disabled people receive doesn't go down. But what if those other pieces, those goods and services, what if they're clawed back? How do we keep monitoring that? And that's how we keep our provincial strategies and our grassroots organizations to keep their ear to the ground and eye on it all. So yes, I completely support everything that you're saying. And there's so many phrases that we're after a hand up, not a handout, and all of those sorts of things. We're not after anything other than a decent standard of living, right? We're not after anything other than to be able to live our lives with autonomy and dignity. It goes back to why an individualized form of support. And we do many things that we don't think of as benefits, right? We build roads. I've heard Heather herself give a very wonderful example of, we put streetlights out there that are of actually no use to her, because as somebody with vision disabilities, she doesn't need to see them to get about at night, but others of us do. So there does need to be this reframing in our society. And for me, it comes back to our values. And at the top of this, when I introduced myself, I talked about that's a big part of my research into disabled people into care. How did we get into this place where our societal values do not see disabled people as these fully fledged Canadian citizens? That's what we need to challenge through that. And, telling these stories of just how tiring it is to spend days going through, the processes to put things in place, right? Whether it's a support, whether it's, my husband, is just getting a new wheelchair, and the the steps that it's taken to go through for that. When so we know that that there are people who can work and want to work, and we know that those people, it might not be full-time hours, but also that those hours should be spent doing things that are commensurate with their capabilities, right? Particularly, talking to a needs crowd, we know people who graduate with all levels of degrees and as disabled people and struggle to find employment, right? I have a friend who graduated as a social worker, and the barriers that are in place to her as a woman in a wheelchair being able to then work as a social worker are massive. So, and they're built out of a risk-based medicalized model that just isn't accurate. So for me, Heather, yes, we do need to change some words, but fundamentally we need to change that value system. That's what's holding it up, is the thought that disabled people out of sight, out of mind, that accommodations at work cost too much, that why we don't need that much money, because what could we possibly spend it on, and so on. So for me, to bring all of this back round to the top, it's all to do with those values and the place that we occupy in society.
Wow, thank you so much for that. This is around the part where I start taking over the entire event to shamelessly promote. So if you have any closing words, I mean, not that you need them, this was also fantastic, but.
Go for it, Carly, it's all yours.
I just have a quick question.
Go for it.
If it's okay. So I have a question about eligibility, okay? If we end up with a Canada Disability benefit, how is the eligibility going to be determined? And is it in any way going to be connected to the disability tax credit? Right. And I know that during the COVID period, for example, the federal government provided the Canada Emergency Student Benefit with more funding for disabled students. They also, there are a bunch of things done around, the CERB and whatnot, but also there was the issue around the disability tax credit, that one-time payment of $600 to disabled folks, which was tied to disability tax credit eligibility. And we had a whole bunch of students coming to us and people in our community saying, can you help me? I have a permanent disability, but I've never been able to qualify for the disability tax credit. So I'm wondering about I've thrown a bunch of things in there, but it has to do with eligibility and how that works.
So I think there's a number of reasons why attaching this to disability tax credit doesn't work. First of all, any of us that work with organizations, as you say, Frank, you had people reaching out to you. I'm on the board of Disability Alliance BC, and we were swamped by people needing to get DTC for eligibility, and it just wasn't because nobody had worked out that people who live in poverty, disability tax credit doesn't work for them because they don't pay taxes. So why would they force themselves through a whole load of hoops that are irrelevant? The other thing about using the CRA process, using the tax year, is that things change too often for people in the working years anyway, but particularly disabled people. You could be a student and then you stop being a student, have employment, it stops, become a parent. And so a yearly calculation on whether you get this benefit or not, or how amount the supplement that the government's proposing isn't nimble enough to deal with it. So that would be one thing. We strongly believe that if you already qualify for any form of disability benefit, be it federal, provincial, territorial, even private, that you should already be eligible for this. How many more hoops do we need? The minister herself, I heard talk to this years ago when she was speaking at a AGM for DABC, Disability Alliance BC, and she said that if you've had your leg amputated, there's no point in asking 3 years later if your leg is still amputated because it doesn't grow back. Well, I was able to say to her last year, I can tell you, my husband's leg has been amputated, and I can tell you Certainly, it doesn't grow back, and there is no need to keep telling people that. So our first line on eligibility is all of those people who are already eligible for one of those things, no need to reapply. Why? But there are people, as you just said, you know, Frank, when it came to the 600 books and they needed that, whatever it was, that, you know, DTC to be able to get through that hoop, there are people who, for many reasons, are living in the shadows and have no disability benefits at the moment, and particularly difficult for people with invisible and episodic disabilities and illnesses. So we do need an application eligibility process to go alongside it. And, you know, we would say that there was a lot of hard work that went into the definition of disability in the Accessible Canada Act. That would be the place to start with that. But it should not be a process that is run by the CRA, because that's just not the right place for it to sit at the moment. It's just not, their systems do not match the needs of this benefit.
Great, I agree with that. And I just want to say one more thing, Carly, I know you want to wrap up. I just want to say, related to what you're talking about with different types of disabilities that are, you know, episodic disabilities and autoimmune related disabilities and things like that, that are hard to be diagnosable, to receive services and supports, including in college and university. It's important to mention that Canada Student Financial Assistance Program is now moving towards the definition of disability to include persistent and prolonged, which they believe will mean that 40,000 more students per year will be eligible for the grants and the benefits and the programming that supports disabled students under the financial assistance programs that the federal government offers. So that has nothing to do with the Canada Disability Benefit, but it's a recognition that we are on a path that is more flexible and supportive, I think, in many of these government programs, which is a good thing.
Awesome. On that note, I will be talking more about the CFSA feedback opportunities. I'm going to make this really quick and worth your time, hopefully. So thank you so much, Michelle, for that incredible event. And thank you to everyone for giving us your time on a Friday afternoon. So we are seeking feedback on behalf of Canada Financial Student Assistance for expanding resources to students with persistent and prolonged disabilities. Like Frank said, 40,000 impacted annually. So feel free to comment directly on their Canada Gazette article, or just send me your thoughts directly. I will send it to them. It's a lot easier, but you know, Canada Gazette. Anyways, we're also seeking partnerships. March of Dimes, I see you in the Zoom-averse, if you will. We're seeking partnerships with disabled students groups, community organizations, you name it, to learn more or schedule an intake meeting. Email me. My email is in the chat. Our next event is with the Heather Walkis, who is in the event right now, which is very fun. February 18th, 12 p.m. EST. Very lively. I will be dropping the registration link in the chat for you. There we go. Another quick news about our financial resources. Our Accessibility Resilience Program is back for another year and now continuously accepting new applications. This is a great way to get reimbursed for the unforeseen cost of transitioning to online learning. This is going to be done soon. If you're hosting a mentorship or internship program, or you have an upcoming event you'd like to promote, please contact Jeannie Gooden, whose email is also in the chat. Two more. Stay tuned for our National Student Awards Programs relaunch, and make sure to stay up to date with NEADS on all of our social media. A lot of links are about to go in the chat, and that's the shameless promo as fast as I could. Thank you, everyone. And Frank, you are good to stop recording if you'd like. I will also be dropping Disability Without Poverty social media, and now it's all there. Frank, I think I can.